welcome back to another episode of That's What She Said. In this second series, Navigating the Political Landscape, we uncover the intersections of history, politics, and culture. I'm Amanda Bryan, your host, and my intention with this series is to create a supportive space for people to connect, reflect, and discern between truth and disinformation, where we can link arms to understand one another and how to move forward with the best possible intent to be helpful, not hurtful. I have received such wonderful feedback from you listeners and followers of the show and of me, and I just want to tell you how much it humbles me and fuels me to continue on to this journey. People that I have not talked to in years have reached out to thank me for my bravery in sharing information, and it truly warms my heart. Like most of you, I feel like I am never doing enough. But when someone points out how you're making a difference in their life, it just hits you in the sweet spot. So thank you so much. And please keep that feedback coming. Keep my fuel going. And if you would like to support me, please follow me on all social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, as well as my YouTube channel. And if you want to go even further, and if you're able to, please consider becoming a monthly supporter of the show, where you can select any amount to donate. And as an independent everything, I really, really appreciate this. Today, we are unraveling a dangerous trend that I've been seeing more and more on social media, and that I was reflecting on as I was reading A Calamity of Souls by David Baldacci, a great read on a white lawyer representing a Black man accused of murdering a rich, old white couple, and the scrutiny that he endures for wanting to stand up for what is clearly the right thing to do, but on the heels of the Jim Crow era and middle of the civil rights movement. So it's a really powerful book. I'm like maybe a third of a way through, and it inspired me on today's episode, which is one that weaves together past injustices with present day misinformation and how I just cannot seem to shake the two. And what else would I do with that but share it with you? So we're going to examine how MAGA and the far-right health and wellness movement groups like MAHA and influential figures pushing anti-science rhetoric are eerily mirroring tactics from the Jim Crow era. And now we are seeing the backlash of anti-vaccine or vaccine hesitancy due to what's going on with the measles outbreak in Texas, in which one unvaccinated child has already died. And what's so frustrating about this, and I'm a mom, I've got 3 kids. I remember being really into the health and wellness field and having so much hesitancy, and I wasn't sure if I should vaccinate my firstborn, and I wasn't even going to. And then I learned about vaccine schedules, and I remember having a very honest conversation with the pediatrician. She was very no bullshit, and she told me how lucky we are, how privileged I was to be able to vaccinate my kid, and that people in other mothers in other part of the world would like do anything to have that layer of protection. And something about that just like really, really hit me home. And so what's so frustrating about something like a measles is something that should or could, I very rarely use the word should because I don't really like it, but I'm going to use it here. It should be eradicated because 2 doses administered in childhood gives a 90% efficiency rate, which means that they are very protected. But with the recent anti-vax movement that has been going on for hundreds of years, things got stirred up during COVID, and now we're seeing the devastating effects of this. And the patterns are striking: manipulation of fear, exploitation of disenfranchised communities, and a strategic erosion of public trust. And we'll end by looking at the bigger picture, the braid, if you will, of history. Present day harm and the future we're shaping, a future at risk. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with the Jim Crow era, let me drop some quick knowledge on you. The term Jim Crow originated from a racist minstrel show character created by Thomas Dartmouth Daddy Rice in the early 19th century. Rice was a white performer, popularized the character in the 1820s and 1830s by wearing blackface, so darkening his skin with burnt cork or grease paint, and then imitating exaggerated, demeaning stereotypes of Black people. His act, known as Jump Jim Crow, portrayed a caricature of an enslaved Black man speaking in a mock dialect, dancing in a shuffling manner, and reinforcing harmful racial stereotypes. The performance became wildly popular among white audiences and helped spread the use of blackface in American entertainment. As minstrels grew, Jim Crow became a widely recognized term used to justify the systemic oppression of Black Americans. Eventually, when Southern states passed segregation laws after the Civil War, these laws were named Jim Crow laws because they functioned to mock, degrade, and control Black people, just as Rice's character had done on stage.
People are afraid to die, so they clutch to something which they think will preserve their lives. So they try to guarantee happiness to themselves by shunting dirt and misery off on someone else. That's Sterling Brown. Sterling Brown's poem, The Strong Man. People feel, if I can keep them out of this building, them off this street, them out of this employment line, I'll live a little longer. They don't think it consciously, but that is fundamental. People are afraid to be pried loose from their ignorance because they know their ignorance so well. They know it better than they know their body odors. And if you say, come on, give up your ignorance, they get into that terrible position, terrifying position which Shakespeare talks about at the end of the soliloquy, Hamlet's soliloquy. They'd rather bear the ills they have than fly to others that they know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all. So they are cowardly. People are afraid to die. So
let's break it down. The Make America Great Again, MAGA movement, initiated by Donald Trump in 2016, built its foundation on nationalism, racial dog whistling, and the strategic spread of disinformation. While MAGA positioned itself as a populist uprising, it has repeatedly echoed tactics from the Jim Crow era, using fear, division, and misinformation to consolidate power and control narratives. One of the offshoots of MAGA is MAHA, Mothers Against Healthy America, or Make America Healthy Again. And this is a far-right wellness and anti-science movement that disguises public health disinformation as quote-unquote freedom of choice. MAHA capitalizes on parental fears, distrust in government, and alternative health trends to push dangerous rhetoric, much like how segregationists once weaponized pseudoscience to uphold racial injustice. To understand today's far-right MAGA, MAHA, we need to look back. The Jim Crow era wasn't just about segregation, it was about controlling information and shaping narratives that kept power in the hands of a select few. The government and media of the time weaponized pseudoscience to justify racial discrimination. They claimed Black Americans were biologically inferior, more prone to disease, and a threat to white public health. Sound familiar? This runs in the same vein as Robert F. Kennedy saying that COVID was ethnically targeted to spare Jews and Chinese people. This is very dangerous rhetoric coming from the head of HHS people. I really, really can't stand the guy. That will be for a whole new episode. But let's break this down even further. So MAGA and the Jim Crow, let's look at some historical parallels. So number one, weaponizing freedom to justify harm. So in the Jim Crow era, segregationalists argued that states had the freedom to enforce racial separation, claiming that it protected both Black and white people. In the MAGA era, MAGA leaders push medical freedom to reject vaccines and public health measures, framing it as personal liberty while endangering entire communities. Number two, disenfranchisement and voter suppression. So in the Jim Crow era, literacy tests, poll taxes, and intimidation were used to suppress the Black voters. In the MAGA era, we're looking at voter ID laws, gerrymandering, and false claims of election fraud target communities of color, aiming to restrict access to democracy. Number 3, misinformation to maintain control. In the Jim Crow era, false science and propaganda were used to justify segregation and claim Black people were more prone to disease. In the MAGA MAHA era, anti vax conspiracies and anti mask rhetoric spread distrust in science, disproportionately harming marginalized communities. Number 4, exploiting religion and spirituality. In the Jim Crow era, racist preachers used Christianity to justify slavery and segregation. In the MAGA MAHA era, we're seeing something very similar, as well as wellness influencers misusing indigenous, holistic, and alternative medicine traditions to push anti-science rhetorics that harm public health. So how did MAGA launch MAHA? MAHA is an evolution of the MAGA playbook, specifically targeting mothers, alternative health advocates, and homeschooling communities. Example 1, MAHA leaders falsely claimed that COVID-19 vaccine caused infertility, appealing to a mother's fears or a future mother's fears. Example 2, influencers pushed natural immunity over vaccines, leading to a resurgence of measles, a disease eradicated in the US by 2000. And example number 3, MAHA leaders collaborate with far-right politicians to ban health education in schools, much like Jim Crow laws once banned Black literacy. So back to the past, that also rings so true for the present. Leaders pushed choice narratives, arguing that segregation was about protecting both races, while really enforcing systematic oppression. Does this sound familiar? I hear so many influencers talk about this all-natural way of life is best for all of us. It benefits all of us, having this choice over our bodies, which, yeah, choice over our bodies, MAGA. But that is simply not true. We need vaccines and even certain chemical compounds to keep us safe. Science is very real. I always think back to the parabens, having parabens in our lotions and our creams. Now, this keeps the product from becoming bacteria ridden, and that could cause a lot of harm. But the whole natural wellness thing, like we were seeing all over labels like paraben free, and really the parabens don't do anything to us. There's a really great podcast episode that I'm going to link in the show notes that takes a cosmetic scientist who creates makeup for well-known brands and talks about the safety of these quote-unquote chemicals provide versus what we've been told by the influencers, like, rubbing coconut oil all over themselves. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about the all-natural approach, but also, I think there can be this perfect marriage between the two, and we can't have one without the other. So yes, I would love to use my coconut oil, but if I have to use my regular Jergens over the counter, that's also okay too. I'm not going to worry about parabens seeking into my blood vessels or whatever the rhetoric is now. Misinformation thrived because the structures of trust in schools and newspapers and public institutions were deliberately manipulated. This was the Jim Crow era, and we're seeing it now with the deconstruction of our federal government and in smaller scales. In the MAHA movement, I see that whole pro for homeschooling, the distrust in media and science, and the MAHA movement is so intimately entwined in the MAGA movement that you really can't talk about one without mentioning the other at this point. So let's fast forward. The far-right wellness movement in MAHA. This is a modern health and wellness space that's under siege. There's a growing faction from MAHA to far-right influencers using fear-based messaging to dismantle public trust in science. Weaponizing freedom of choice, just like segregationists argued for states' rights to keep Jim Crow laws, today's health disinformation campaigns frame anti-vaccine rhetoric as a personal liability, liberty issue. Targeting marginalized groups, Black communities once experimented on without consent are now targeted with anti-vax propaganda, stoking distrust in medical institutions, and erasing science with spiritual bypassing. This is probably the one that's most near and dear to my heart. The wellness movement has these deep roots in indigenous and ancient healing, but extremists co opt these traditions and twist them into conspiracy theories that reject modern medicine. And honestly, whitewash a lot of the time. I mean, we see this in the yoga community where very little respects are paid to the actual roots of yoga. Once it came over here to the West, it was so whitewashed that now those lines are so blurred, and why it's really important to uphold the integrity of our history, the integrity of where things come from. Someone just posted or sent to me some female at a podium. It kind of looked like a church setting. And she was talking about how there's no such thing as Christian yoga because yoga poses are devoted to like 300 gods or something. Like, it was the most ridiculous thing. Yoga has no religious affiliation. It is not honoring or posing to any gods whatsoever. And so you see something like that, and it's just baffling. It's like just straight up garbage, but right there, and so passionate. But now we're, starting to see the consequences of these things. We're seeing the measles outbreaks. We're, things with the bird flu. Like, we're seeing how us not being in the know or a part of it is consequential, or of us just straight up being lied to. In the early 1900s, segregationists refused public health measures, believing government interventions were a threat to their way of life. The result? Epidemics ravaged communities. And now history repeats itself. Measles was eradicated in the US by 2000. It's now back. Parents have been misled by influencers, refusing vaccines, endangering immune-compromised children and public health. And the language of natural immunity echoes the pseudoscience of the past, where racist health policies denied medical care to marginalized groups. So the Braid Titans, past and present, are indistinguishable. In many indigenous cultures, the braid is sacred. It represents the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit, and it also symbolizes the past, present, and future woven together. And with two daughters that play softball, I do a lot of braiding. But what happens when that braid is severed? When ancient healing traditions are hijacked by those pushing anti-science narratives? When history lessons are ignored and misinformation spreads like wildfire? When we forget that real healing, true wellness, is communal, rooted in both science and spirit? If we continue on this path, the consequences will be irreversible. We've seen this before, and we know how it ends. Jim Crow laws did not disappear overnight. They evolved into mass incarceration, voter suppression, and systemic inequalities. Similarly, MAGA's influence has not ended. It's adopted into movements like MAHA and threatening public health and democracy under the guise of quote-unquote freedom. As a history buff, history warns us of what happens when misinformation is allowed to fester. And if we do not recognize these patterns, we risk repeating the injustices of the past, and this time with a deadly public health twist. The question is, will we stop it in time? That's it for today's episode of That's What She Said. If this conversation resonated with you, please share it. Feel free to email me at amanda@amandabryanTherapy.com. And let's make sure that we are challenging disinformation, and most importantly, we're staying informed and flexible. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, stay well. And that's what she said.